The truth will set you free. The truth will set you free.
Hey guys, Paeter here from christiangeekcentral.com and Spirit Blade Productions. Right now I'm going to attempt to examine the Bible and dissect some of the churchy language we can really easily take for granted, digging into history and languages, as I'm able anyway, to try and get at the heart of the text so that we can hopefully see and then apply at least some of what God has for you and me in these words today. Now, I'm not formally trained in Scripture. I'm just a guy using resources and a questioning mind to try and get at the truth, and that's something that we can all do, so I hope that you'll do that with me. We're getting back into the book of Proverbs after a while, after catching up with a long-lost installment last time. Now we are properly back into our Proverbs study, picking it up at chapter 10. First, I'm going to give just some general comments about the book of Proverbs, and in particular, the chapters we're entering into now with chapter 10, because it does switch modes in terms of style and kind of like the literary mode that it's in. These chapters, starting with chapter 10, are more like what we think of when we hear the word proverb. They are collections of short sayings, often arranged without an apparent theme or apart from categories that you and I might reorder them into. Proverbs reveals a lot about how the currents of the world we live in tend to flow. Although Proverbs often use wording that to us will sound straightforwardly predictive, do A and B will happen, the genre of proverb needs to be understood as speaking in terms of what is generally true in life. That's what a proverb does. There are certainly exceptions, and experiencing those can be among life's most baffling and difficult challenges. But the Bible recognizes that. If you read the book of Ecclesiastes and Job, they have more to say on that topic when the norms of life, when things don't work out as we expect based on what God has revealed through the wisdom of His Word. What do we do when things don't play out the way we're told they generally will? And so that's kind of addressing a different side of just kind of wisdom and navigating life. And so the books of Ecclesiastes and Job are highly recommended. Proverbs also often speaks using the stereotypes of like the wise person and the fool, or some similar kind of labels that will be applied. But no one is always the wise person, and no one is always the fool. As the old song says, everybody plays the fool sometime. And I can't tell you how many times in preparing my notes for Proverbs, I've heard that song come into my head. So as we read those kinds of Proverbs, our task really is not to figure out, okay, can I feel okay about where I'm at? Am I basically like the wise person, or am I like the fool? Really, instead, we need to recognize that we've always got some of both, at least, to varying degrees going on in the different areas of life that Proverbs touches on. So instead, we should determine, or try to determine, how we can become more like the ideal of the wise person and veer away from playing the part of the fool in given areas of our lives. The book of Proverbs is also expressed in the context of a father speaking to his son. We saw that a lot in the early chapters. This was probably because in the ancient Hebrew home, the father was ultimately responsible for creating and shaping the culture and values of the family unit. And so a father passing core values to his son would really be vital. That said, most, if not all, Proverbs can be applied in core principle to either male or female readers. The Expositor's Bible Commentary summarizes the purpose of Proverbs in a way that I think is important to note. It says, "The book of Proverbs is a marvelous collection of wise sayings and instructions for living a useful and effective life." Notice that this summary of Proverbs does not say that it's a book about how to make life easy, even though wisdom can help us avoid some troubles. It's also not a book that, when followed, guarantees financial or social success in life, although it can certainly help us to avoid some financial and relational problems. Proverbs helps us become increasingly useful and effective representatives of Yahweh in this world. Over the years, I've seen a lot of geeks, certainly myself, fail to be useful and effective representatives of Yahweh because we lack wisdom. We lack an understanding of kind of how the world works and how to navigate life in light of that. Some geeks, might have a brilliant intellect, but are totally out of the loop when it comes to how the world works, how people generally work, and how to navigate life in light of those things. That can look like social awkwardness. insensitivity, oversensitivity, or any number of things. We geeks can find ourselves just bewildered or frustrated by people and the normal currents of life, feeling like everyone else is an alien, or that maybe we are the alien. And so a book like Proverbs is a great place for us to get equipped for what life throws at us, learning to deal with life the way it actually is and tends to be, which I think, Proverbs is a lot about helping us to adjust our expectations as well, because we can easily say to ourselves, oh, people are so weird, and why aren't they this, and why aren't they that? Yeah, well, the world's a messed up place. But at the end of the day, we got to say, okay, so the world is a messed up place. This is how it is. And, observing that it should be different is not going to help us navigate the reality of what life actually is. And so that's why Proverbs is so valuable. It's like, okay, this is how the world is going to tend to be. How do we best navigate in light of that? And in doing that, we become increasingly able to live effective lives for the purposes that God has for us. Now, because of the way that thoughts are organized in this part of Proverbs we're getting into, I'm going to set aside my normal format in which I give general observations and explanations of the entire passage, followed by geek application of the whole passage. Instead, I think I'm going to just probably take each proverb one at a time, give some basic explanation, followed by potential geek application, before moving on then to the next proverb in whatever passage or collection of verses we're looking at. So instead of one big section at the end where I ask, okay, what's in this maybe specifically for geeks, I'm going to be exploring that intermittently throughout as we go through each verse or proverb. Okay, that said, let's dive in. Proverbs chapter 10, verses 1 through 5 in the ESV says, "The Proverbs of Solomon. A wise son makes a glad father, but a foolish son is a sorrow to his mother. Treasures gained by wickedness do not profit, but righteousness delivers from death." Yahweh, which is L-O-R-D in all caps, just as a reminder, that is written that way, and in the Hebrew it's the proper noun, the proper name of God, Yahweh. So I have gotten into the habit for years of just saying Yahweh when I see L-O-R-D in all caps. Yahweh does not let the righteous go hungry, but he thwarts the craving of the wicked. A slack hand causes poverty, but the hand of the diligent makes rich. He who gathers in summer is a prudent son, but he who sleeps in harvest is a son who brings shame. If there is a through line for these first 5 verses, it seems to me to be connected to wisdom or foolishness and their relationship to material wealth and material well-being, but even that is a loose connection. Verse 1. The Proverbs of Solomon. Let's stop there. These Proverbs being of Solomon could mean that they were written by him, collected and organized by him, or have some other connection to him. One commentary I read observes that the numerical values of the consonants in the Hebrew word for Solomon total 375, which is the exact number of verses in chapter 10:1 through 22:16, which is its own section. At that point, the format changes going forward, which is just another reminder of the meticulous thought and artistry involved in this and other works of Scripture. Setting that puzzle aside, though, the actual proverb in verse 1 reads, "A wise son makes a glad father, but a foolish son is a sorrow to his mother." This certainly rings true to me as a dad in a way that I didn't appreciate as a son living with my parents. It may be worthwhile to notice that the father is made glad by a wise son. In most homes, the approval of a father is more slow in coming or in being expressed than from a mother. It's a little bit maybe more valuable and precious in the mind of the child. So mention of making specifically a father glad, I suspect is very intentional. Similarly, I think most children are more sensitive to or are more aware of the times that their mothers are saddened. So appealing to the hurt of a mother generally speaks more strongly than appealing to the hurt feelings of a father, which, them being the more of the disciplinary figure, we may find ourselves kind of hardened against our fathers a little more than our mothers. So I think appealing to the feelings of our mother is probably very intentional here. In both cases, the point of the proverb is that our foolishness does not only affect us as individuals. Even if our choices in life do not materially affect anyone else, the people who love us most can still be very grieved when we make foolish choices, or become happy when we make wise choices. As geeks, we are often so internal and self-focused that we fail to consider how our choices may have an emotional impact on others in ways that we may not expect. And so this is a valuable eye-opener for us. Verse 2 says, "Treasures gained by wickedness do not profit, but righteousness delivers from death." Obviously, people can and do materially profit from immoral choices in life. But the contrast here is revealing that when the reality of death enters the context, sinfully gained resources do not profit us by comparison. Money and things we buy will all come and go, but living in obedience to God can rescue from death. Now, when this proverb was written, it likely referred primarily to rescue from physical death, which foolishness can bring us to more quickly. But as New Covenant believers, we can also see how righteousness, specifically the righteousness of Christ placed on our record before God, results in ultimate and eternal rescue from death. The wickedness by which treasure is gained in this proverb refers to violence or breaking civil laws. I found that really interesting. While geeks aren't known for being violent, we can be in the habit of pirating our entertainment. This may be most common in the realm of video game emulation, which I made a 3-part series on a number of years ago at youtube.com/christiangeekcentral. You can go there, put the keyword emulation in the search field, and those 3 videos should pop up. It may seem harmless, but pirating entertainment shapes us into people who increasingly brush aside our values and submission to God whenever our feelings and cravings come to bear. And that's a foolish and self-destructive mode to live in. Verse 3, "Yahweh does not let the righteous go hungry, but he thwarts the craving of the wicked." The nature of living in obedience to Yahweh tends toward a life in which we have the food that we need. For example, as believers in obedience to Yahweh and his word, we should, in the course of living in obedience to Yahweh and his word, we should be developing a good work ethic, a love for people, and developing a humble interest in serving others. All traits that tend to get people employed and keeping employment. On top of that, communities of people that are living in submission to Yahweh love and care for each other's practical needs, like food. So these factors, among many others, can, I think, explain how the stated blessing in this proverb of the righteous not going hungry really works itself out as a reality. Conversely, when we live outside of God's will, living in a selfish and self-absorbed way in which pursuing good and pleasure for ourselves is a higher priority than living in submission to God, we ironically find our pursuit of material things thwarted, either because of an inability to obtain those things or because we find that those things do not truly satisfy our cravings. I think it's noteworthy that it's the craving that's thwarted here. As a geek, I've experienced this when I over-prioritize entertainment or me time. There comes a point where I can feel empty and unfulfilled and ask myself, what am I doing? What in the world am I doing? I've been staring at this screen for X number of hours. What in the world am I doing? So this proverb is trying to spare us having to learn about that emptiness or thwarting from experience, and instead trying to lead us to trust that a life prioritizing submission to Yahweh will provide us with what we truly need. Verse 4, "A slack hand causes poverty, but the hand of the diligent makes rich." An idea behind the Hebrew word for slack here is negligent. This proverb can refer to both just an out-and-out lack of work or careless and sloppy work that we're not invested in. This is contrasted with the thoughtful and careful work that tends to result in success and income. And work that is sloppy or falls short in quality tends to keep us from finding or keeping jobs and having an income. This is something I fall short in, just this not working diligently when doing work that I'm not personally passionate about. When the work is driven by my passion, vision, and goals, then I can really dive in and pursue excellence and quality work. but I'm not very disciplined or thoughtful in work that serves another person's vision. I can't help but suspect that my lifelong love and prioritization of entertainment has contributed to this problem. But I do find I can counter this defect in character some if I am able to identify purpose in what I'm doing. Colossians 3:23 and 24 instructs workers to do their work for the Lord and not for humans. Even as they're working for humans, to have their motivation be working for the Lord. And I think working our minds through that can be really helpful in making us diligent workers doing quality work. And then finally, verse 5, he who gathers in summer is a prudent son, but he who sleeps in harvest is a son who brings shame. Israel's summers are hot. When I went there years and years ago, stepping off the bus in the summer felt like teleporting back to my home here in Arizona, in the summers in Arizona. Nobody wants to work outside in either place during the summers. But this proverb says that the person who does that hot work outside in the summer, even though it's hard, is wise. And the son who stays inside and sleeps instead of doing that hard work is put to shame. Now that's interesting. Why is shame mentioned instead of the more practical concern of the work not getting done? And before that, we saw that, when you slack off from work, and in the Proverbs above this, that the appeal was to the sense of preserving your income, in sustaining yourself, having the food that you need, those kind of tangible things. And here, it's switching to this idea of shame would be a reason that you ought to be willing to work hard. I suspect because some types of work will get done by others even when we slack off, that's kind of why there's maybe an appeal here to shame. Israel thrived only as a community working together, not through individualistic attitudes like the kind ingrained into us by modern American or Western culture today. And I think this aspect of shame and wanting to avoid shame should lead us to reflect on the fact that when we let others do work that we should be helping with as well, it hurts our relationship with those around us, maybe puts us in a shameful light in those relationships, and our relational connection to our communities is also similarly harmed. And like ancient Israel, the church today is meant to function as a community, as a body. Once we are part of a church community and have grown enough in our faith to start serving, we eventually start to stand out like an ugly sore if we merely consume and take in our local churches without serving in those communities. As geeks, I think our love of entertainment can leave us with a poor work ethic. And our insecurity, which is also very common among geeks, can leave us vulnerable to feeling shame. So this proverb may resonate with some of us in a unique and in an extra powerful way. Should shame be a motivator? Well, no, love should be our motivator. But the author of this proverb knows that sometimes the prospect of experiencing shame is what we need to wake us up. And so when other things won't wake us up from apathy or laziness, sometimes the potential for shame can serve a purpose. Now, that's not to say that we should leverage shame and be shaming each other. Far from it. But the Holy Spirit knows that we will feel shame under certain circumstances, and so appeals to our desire to avoid shame here in order to get our attention and lead us to a better way of thinking about work and service. If you would like some help finding a good church in your area, I would love to help you do that if I can. Online resources and communities are good supplements, but by their very nature, they can't speak to your particular situation like relationships in a local church can. The context for almost everything in the New Testament assumes that we are serving and building purposeful relationships in a local church. So whether you're in a church that lacks Bible-based intentionality or maybe not attending any church at all right now, if I can help you get connected to an authentic, compassionate, Bible-oriented church, I would love to do that. Email me, please, paeter@spiritblade.com, and we can try to look at some websites of churches in your area together.